Hi and welcome to Hearthside. My name is Michelle. I am the author of this blog. I'm just going through different articles and trying to create a video version for accessibility reasons. This one's called Examining Naudiz in 2021. It's based on this book, The Nordic Animist Year by Rune Rasmussen. He wrote this book as a companion book for his runic animist calendar. It talks a little bit about Nordic holidays which have heathen origins, or at least pagan origins, from the region. And it also talks about his calendar, and this particular post is talking about how there's runes in his calendar that represent a 19-year cycle. So this one I was looking at the year 20 and 2021. So Hagalas or Hail was the rune for 2020, and then the rune for 2021 was Naudiz or Need. And then our current year 2022 is Isa, which is ice, and I have a separate post that I created for that this year. What I'm attempting to accomplish in this post is I'm looking at the Swedish rune poem that he was basing this 19-year cycle on, looking at there's like sort of a little verse for each year that it's sort of like a farmer's almanac, I would say. So it gives you an idea of what kind of year you're going to have in regards to agriculture, but I was trying to see if the rune poems would potentially apply beyond agriculture into a broader cycle of world events. Still on the fence as to whether or not that is the case, and I did another post this year, and something I will continue just as a sort of a curiosity. I don't actually know if I'm onto anything, but like it seems like so far there does seem to be a bit of a pattern to me, but maybe I'm just like putting too much onto it. But yeah, if you are interested in it, look for yourself and determine for yourself if you think there's any value in it. For this one, I'm just going to mostly read from the post itself, just because I was like skipping around a lot and there's a lot of ideas I'm trying to pull in. I think it will just be easier for flow if I do it that way. So I was saying, a lot of people were talking about the Isa rune, the ice rune, as the rune that represents the pandemic, and they were seeing it as Isa in the idea of stagnance. But if we're looking at like the Isa rune, it's not really that simple. It's not just about stagnance, it's about like growth, and like it's about taking a pause and then moving forward from it. Ice doesn't last forever. Ice melts. Ice is fragile. There's all these things, and like I'll go more into what Isa means as a rune in the 2022 post, which I will link to this video as well. But yeah, people were using this rune specifically to talk about the pandemic, which it doesn't seem like it's a great fit. It also is about resiliency, basically. So then that got me thinking about the runic animist year and the animist calendar that Rune had created, and this Swedish rune poem. So it has two sets of runes in the calendar that Rune created. So there's the Sunday runes, which show what day a Sunday falls on. Those were created on prinstaves that were created during Christian times, just as Christianity was coming to Scandinavia, so that you would know when to go to church. And then the other set of runes is what's called golden numbers, and it shows when the new moon falls each year, but each year in the 19-year cycle, it's a different rune that denotes the new moon, and that is the rune that is linked to the Swedish rune poem. And the Swedish rune poem, there's also a Norwegian rune poem, there's an Anglo-Saxon rune poem, and an Icelandic rune poem, and they all have pretty much the same runes in the same spot in the poem, but their verses are a little bit different. This article, I'm looking at the Swedish rune poem, and I'm also looking at the Norwegian rune poem. So I'm looking at these as insights, as predictions for the year, rather than observable cycles that, or I should say, I'm looking for like observable cycles, basically, that people historically would have noticed. I'm looking for like world events or things that happen on a broader scale, basically. So it's not just the agricultural aspect I'm looking at, although that would have been important at the time that these prim staves were first created, as they were doing a lot of agriculture. But the elder heathens were much more aware of the earth than we are and its natural cycles, because we're kind of a little bit separated from nature, a lot of us, especially if we're living in cities. We spend a lot of time inside and not outside, on computers, on technology, and we just don't see the world the same way. There's so much light pollution, there's so much going on that's affecting our connection with nature. So there's a good possibility that the elder heathens were more aware of these larger cycles than we are, and they would have it all in their sort of oral memories passed down between generations. So I think that's probably what these rune poems are, is like a oral tradition to help them recognize these cycles, basically, over time. So first of all, I was looking at the poems for 2020, and I'm just going to read the English translation of the poem, and it says, "Hail is best when you are at home. Hail is hardest rain." And it says timely winter or a good grain year. And then the next one for 2021, it says, "Need is the only choice. Northern weather is coldest. There will be hard times." So I found that this information was interesting because, these are like, from the Swedish rune poem, that I've been looking for it online and I haven't really found a copy. Like, I have the copy that's written in Rune's book here, but like I could find all these other poems, the Norwegian rune poem, etc., and they have very similar language, not identical, but like similar, and I just thought it was like strange that like for some reason this one is not available easily, at least for me as an English speaker. I don't speak Swedish, and I just haven't been able to really find it online. So then I pulled the Norwegian rune poems that I could find online just to like compare them. So 2020, it says, "Hail is the coldest of grain. Christ created the world of old." So it's obviously been Christianized a bit. So it's like it's saying it's cold, it's better to stay inside, it's the hardest rain, it's the coldest grain. So it's a very similar idea. It just has this Christian line added on the end in the Norwegian one, which I don't even think it adds any value to the poem in this case. Moving on to the 2021 for the need rune. "Need gives little choice. A naked man is chilled by the frost." So this one is the same thing. It's talking about northern weather, it's talking about being cold, it's talking about there being hard times and scarcity, basically. So looking at these combined sources, we can see that the Nordic Animist calendar seems to be accurate, that 2020 is supposed to be a difficult year, but also a good grain year. It says hail is best when you're at home, and that does seem like an accurate description of the year in general. There have been a lot of storms in 2020, and staying home and tending the crops would be beneficial, especially with so many storms. But I'm not sure if I want to take hail in this context to be literal hail either. Like, it could be hail, but there's other reasons that they might use the hail rune. And so I'm thinking 2020 has been a blight year for crops. And I don't know if that was because I was in Canada. I did look at Scandinavia, and it looked like Sweden had had a good year for grain. So that could just be a regional variation. As I was saying, like, Rune is from Sweden. These are based on Scandinavian climate and region. So from an agricultural perspective, I'm not sure how useful it would be for me as a Canadian. What I do think is, like, there's more to it, like, on a world stage, but I'll get to that in a moment. I want to talk about the 2021 year. So in the 2021 year, which is marked by the need rune, it suggests hard times. And this was like partway into the year. It was only April or May, I think, when I wrote this, so I was kind of asking how will this manifest, and I said that the water table in my region was unusually low for this time of year. We were having a lot of cold weather, even though there wasn't much snow and much melt into the river. And no one had been talking about it because of the pandemic looming. So my prediction at that time was that it was going to be a drought year, and that is pretty much what happened in my region. Was it ended up being a drought year. And I feel like the pandemic also was leading to hard times, basically, in the year 2021 that went beyond just agriculture. That seems like you have to be careful. Staying close to home would be a good idea again this year. And just being wise with your resources. It was a year with, like, a lot of suffering, a lot of people losing jobs, and then what I was wondering was, it was talking a lot about it being cold, and, like, I didn't think last year had a lot of cold temperatures, so I wasn't sure if maybe cold was also a metaphor. So then I started looking back to data from the last 19-year cycle, just so that I could try to, like, see if there was a pattern. So the last year that was a hail year was 2001, I should say. So the major world events were the World Trade Center attack, and also an outbreak of West Nile virus in North America, and a massive earthquake in India that killed millions. Also, the beginning of the recession in the United States. Then if we look at 2002, which was the last need year, that was when the SARS outbreak occurred and the United States started their war on terrorism. It was also a lot of wildfires and drought across North America, and continued recession for the United States. So what I was predicting from this is it looks like there is sort of like a cycle, and it seems to be like about a 3-year cycle within the 19-year cycle, starting with the hail year, where it's 3 stagnant-ish years, basically. So it would have been 2001, 2002, 2003, and then again 2020, 2021, 2022. Now, how the reason for the stagnance and these events were different. So this one, it looked like it was triggered 2001 by the World Trade Center attack, which led into the war on terrorism, which led into kind of a recession. And then for the 2020 year, it would have been the pandemic and the stagnance that occurred from the pandemic, which also is leading, at least in Canada, to a recession. So it looks like there might be a pattern, but again, like, I've only got 2 years worth of data, so I would have to go back further if possible to find records to see if it was more sustained than just that. This is just all sort of guesswork. So then I was trying to predict what the year 2021 would look like. I said that 2021 would probably be a trial. People are getting vaccinated, but there's no clear plan for opening things up, or what the magic threshold of percentage of vaccinated people would be. That in my region, the number of new cases was currently rising, and we were going into lockdown again, so it was causing public unrest. I was unsure whether it would also cause civil unrest, and also that because we were so focused on the pandemic that we weren't seeing other patterns occurring: rising prices in fuel, rising prices for goods in stores, and problems with the water table in my region leading to drought. And also I said there was a lot of cold nights even into the late like April and May, so that meant that planting was not a possibility, so the crops were probably going to suffer. And I said that everything was being focused on healthcare, which is good but not sustainable because there's other things that need to be invested in. Otherwise, there's going to be economic recourse, basically. So that was what I was predicting for that, and it looks like for the majority of it, that came to be true. Now it's all just educated guessing based on what I was looking at from this 19-year cycle. So if you're interested in this for this year, I've done the one for the ESA rune, and I'll link it as well. And you guys are welcome to tell me if you think there's any validity or if I'm just making stuff up. Alright, talk to you next time.